Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the Euro 2020 Wrap, a weekly series that I'm running throughout the Euros where I give my opinion and we analyse the highs and the lows of the Euros. So let's get into it. Let's roll the intro. So guys, welcome. We have now finished match day 1. We're actually halfway through match day 2, and we've got our first look at all of the teams now in the Euros. I think overall, there hasn't been too many surprises. I think every team has played as you would have expected them to. I think some of the bigger teams have maybe got out the blocks slightly slower than they would have expected, but we see that in tournaments. It takes time for teams to build a bit of momentum, get that fluidity going in their play. You've got to remember, these players don't necessarily play together every week, and so that kind of chemistry that you see with club teams isn't necessarily there in international football, and so it takes a couple of games for the players and the teams and the management and everything to really get settled down before we see some of the better football that we will no doubt see in the knockout stages. So let's start off talking about England. Now, it has to be the place we start. I'm here in England. I'm an England fan. And we've got 2 games to analyse now that England have played their second game. And the first one against Croatia, which was a 1-0 victory thanks to a Raheem Sterling goal in the second half. And then a very disappointing, but not as bad as I think some people are making out, 0-0 draw against Scotland at home at Wembley. So let's break them down first. Let's break down the first one, the Croatia game. I think it was the first game of a tournament and we got a win out of it, right? And that is the most important thing. The performance was okay. I think the front three is an interesting front three, and I think this really impacted us more in the Scotland game than in the Croatia game. And the reason I say that is because you've got Raheem Sterling on one side and Phil Foden on the other side. Now, neither one of those players, Raheem Sterling this past season hasn't been very much of a goal threat. His goal scoring's kind of gone out the window this season. We all know that. It's fairly well documented. And then you've got Phil Foden out on the right. And he isn't necessarily a goal scorer. He is a creator that arguably probably should be playing in the centre of the pitch, but because of the players we have in those positions, he's having to play out on the right. So Southgate can get him in the team. But he doesn't really pose too much of a goal threat either, even though he obviously did hit the post early on against Croatia. And with Harry Kane dropping deep and the team just struggling to get the ball into Harry Kane more quickly, the reason I think we're struggling, and the reason we struggled in particular against Scotland, was that goal threat just doesn't exist. And which is why I think some people are very much frustrated with that front three. And obviously we've seen in the media loads of calls for Jack Grealish, but I don't actually think Jack Grealish is the answer. I think what we need is a presence up front that's going to cause a problem for defenders and, more importantly, get shots away on target. You know, just thinking back at the Scotland game and the Croatia game, do you guys really remember either keeper from Scotland or Croatia really making a great save or a number of saves? Yes, we hit the post in both games, but their keepers have not been made to work. And that's why I actually think the answer isn't Jack Grealish. I think the answer is actually one of Marcus Rashford or Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I think Harry Kane, for whatever reason, be it maybe tiredness, be it the system and things not necessarily being the same as if when he was at Tottenham, I think is just not really helping the team. And when he's not getting those shots away on target, bullying the defenders, it's kind of hard to understand what he's contributing to the team. Now, obviously, we have to kind of saying that we still have to kind of have him on the pitch. He's our best finisher when it comes to penalties and things like that. Should we win any, he's the best penalty taker we have. But I just think maybe, and obviously going into the final game now where Czech Republic have also, they won their first game against Scotland. They're on 4 points. England are on 4 points too. Maybe it gives an opportunity for Gareth Southgate just try something a little bit different. Obviously dropping Harry Kane would be a huge thing and it would be talked about a lot, but I think it might be a brave decision just to see how we could play and just to see whether if we do get further in the competition, when maybe things aren't working with Harry Kane, can he switch to a Marcus Rashford through the middle like he did really towards the end of the Scotland game, but it was almost too late to make a difference, or whether he can trust someone like Dominic Calvert-Lewin to lead the line in a knockout game. I think he can, and I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin, obviously being a Liverpool fan, I don't necessarily like him, but in terms of what he can offer the England team, I still think he offers something quite different to Harry Kane. But the problem with it, if we play Dominic Calvert-Lewin, the problem is we have to get service into the box. And that comes on to my next point, where we're going to talk about fullbacks. Now, before the tournament, there was so much talk about fullbacks, 4 right backs, which of the left backs was going to start. Obviously, Southgate threw everything out of the water by playing Trippier at left back against Croatia. But other than a kind of an okay performance from Trippier, every fullback so far, obviously we're going on a sample size of 2 games here at the moment, so it's not a statistically significant amount of games, but all of the fullbacks have been terrible. Defensively, they've been okay, but we haven't really been properly tested by either team. But offensively, it's been just terrible. There's been like very few crosses into the box. There was 1 cross into the box from Reece James, which Harry Kane nearly got onto, which is probably the only sniff at goal Harry Kane really had. But Reece James in the Scotland game, where were those bombing runs forward where he was whipping the ball in that we saw so much at Chelsea? Maybe that was because he was on the right hand side of a 5, and he was allowed to get a bit more forward, whereas for England he seems to be playing right back. But just those balls in from the wings, they've just disappeared, and that's what Harry Kane thrives on. Those balls into the box where he can get in front of the defender, he's good in the air, and those have just been missing. And I'm not sure why. I think it could be instruction. I think it's with Gareth Southgate not playing a 5 at the back, I think he's given probably a bit more instruction to that back 4 to stay a lot more kind of solid and rigid and don't break formation if the fullbacks press forward, where obviously 1 goes and 1 stays, and to expose ourselves like that. But I think it's just stifling our ability to score. And yes, we might not concede, but if we're not going to score, like, what's the point? And I think all the fullbacks have been very disappointing. I think the only one we haven't seen yet is Ben Chilwell, who maybe we'll see in the final game against Czech Republic, and it'll be interesting to see whether Gareth Southgate sticks with the 4, because obviously going into the tournament, everyone thought he was going to play a 5 at the back, but with Harry Maguire coming back, hopefully into the team, will Southgate stick with a 4 and replace Tyrone Mings with Harry Maguire, or will he go to a 5, keep Tyrone Mings in there, but maybe give a little more license for the likes of Reece James and possibly Chilwell on the left to really get forward a bit more and get those balls into the box? Because I think that will hopefully help get more out of Harry Kane than we have been getting so far. But overall, the one thing I'd like to say is really nothing to get too panicky about. Now, obviously we've seen lots of clickbaity titles, people on Twitter getting crazy, and yes, it was Scotland, so that performance and that game is always scrutinised a bit more, but we've got 4 points. We're in a group where we're kind of joint at the top now with Czech Republic. Croatia and Scotland obviously play. That'll be a must-win game for both teams. And we have Czech Republic as well. Both games being played at the same time, remember, on match day 3 as well, so you're not going to know what the result is going into your game. But as I said, overall, it's nothing to panic about. Obviously, there's the whole bit around if we finish second in the group, we might get an easier round of 16 game, as if we win the group, we'll be playing the runners-up from the group of death, which looks like it will most likely be Portugal or Germany as the runners-up in that group. But my philosophy on it is, if we're going to win this tournament, we're going to have to face these teams at one point. And honestly, the sooner you face them, the better, because they're less into their groove. If it's first knockout round, there's always some nerves there. There'll be lots of players, both in the Portugal and Germany team, that you would expect to be the runners-up, that maybe wouldn't be at their top form. And, it's all those types of things, right? And I think it would be very wrong for England to try and finish second, because, I don't know, I just don't think that's the right way to approach it. So next, let's touch on to who I think was probably the most disappointing team of match day 1. I think that was Spain for me. I think there was, Spain have a very good crop of very young players. Now, obviously, a lot of the old guard, the PKs, obviously the Busquets has the whole COVID issue, no Ramos, no De Gea. There's a real, I think, a good kind of young vibe to Spain, but I think they really struggled against Sweden. Obviously, they had a lot of the ball. Sweden came to basically put a block up, and they did very well at that. I think I have a big problem with Spain in that Luis Enrique seems to prefer Alvaro Morata. Now, I have no idea why that is the case. I think he is one of the most ridiculously terrible strikers in Europe, and he's given many opportunities, be it at Chelsea, be it Juventus, be it at Spain, and particularly when you got someone like Gerard Moreno on the bench, who has had such a good season for Villarreal, and who I think is just way better at finishing, holding up the ball, just in every single way. I think he's just so much better, and I found that really frustrating watching Spain. But then again, Sweden in that game looked quite dangerous on the break. And obviously they did go on and get the win against Slovakia in their second game as well. But I thought Isaac, top player, obviously playing for Real Sociedad, regardless of whether Sweden get through the group stages or not. I think some teams around Europe will definitely be sniffing around him because he looks a bit taller, so maybe you think, he's a hold-up man, maybe his feet aren't so good, but you look at just the way he controls the ball, gets the ball around defenders, just fantastic, really close ball control, and he looks like a very, very good talent, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a little move somewhere around Europe this summer. Saying that, after that first result though, I still think Spain will qualify from that group. I think with their game against Poland, which is this evening, I think they will beat them. Poland look pretty toothless when they can't get Lewandowski into the game. They really do struggle, and I think they'll not have enough for Spain. I think Spain will probably start with Gerard Moreno in this game and ultimately learn from their mistakes and put away their chances. So I still do see them topping this group ultimately with their last game against Slovakia and going through, but I don't really see them progressing past the quarterfinals as well. And the reason I say that is because, yes, they maybe haven't got that huge quality up front, even with Gerard Moreno, but defensively they look a bit sus as well with Pau Torres and Aymeric Laporte, two players that haven't really played together, obviously with Laporte just making his transition over to Spain so late in the day. They haven't really got that chemistry. Unai Simon looks okay, nothing special. I don't think he's a huge upgrade on David De Gea. But yeah, I think the quarterfinals is probably about as far as they can go. But obviously, I'm judging that based on one performance. Now, lots of things can change, and things change very quickly in a tournament in particular. But I think Spain are not going to get much further than the quarterfinals. So next up, we're going to be talking about France. And the question before the tournament was, they are the favourites. Can they replicate the finals performance they got in the last Euros, the World Cup they've won in 2018? And the answer from one game really is yes. They looked very, very good. The player I was probably most impressed with was Theo Hernandez on at left back. I thought he was fantastic, like just absolute energy on the left-hand side. Obviously, he crossed the ball, which Hummels turned into his own net to give France the victory. But overall, France looked very good without looking crazily impressive, and I think that was the case for all the teams, right? No one looked super impressive, but there were the better teams just looked solid, and you can see how they're going to use that as building blocks to just get better and stronger. All of the players that you would have expected to have big games had fairly good games. Kante, Pogba, Griezmann, who was fantastic. One of the elements of his game, which maybe he seems to turn up when he plays for France as opposed to when he plays for Barcelona, is just his work rate and the fact how he gets around and everything. He was just everywhere against Germany, like really causing problems to Toni Kroos, Ilkay Gundogan, and just fantastic performance from him. And even Mbappe was okay. Obviously, he could have scored a fantastic goal in the second half, which was ruled out for offside. He's looked menacing. And so I don't think there's anything that's come out from that first game that makes me think that France are not the favourites. They still look very good. And obviously with Hungary being their second opponent in the group, they've got a very good chance to get 6 points early on and secure themselves a path through to the knockout stages, with Germany playing Portugal, which I am very much looking forward to. I think that will be a fantastic game. I think both teams are very evenly matched. I think one thing Germany will change going into that game is I think they will start with one of Timo Werner or Kevin Volland. And I think that's because they played Serge Gnabry in the, I would say, striker position. I wouldn't say he's even playing in a false nine, but like he played as a striker position. And I think he had one chance in the second half where he just didn't really connect with the ball properly, and it bounced over the crossbar. But I just feel like they didn't have that like target man. They didn't have someone who was going to put the ball in the net. Not saying Timo Werner is that guy, but that kind of presence up there, which gives you the threat that someone's going to put it in, which causes a lot more space for some of the players around him. And I'd love to see Gnabry out on the right and maybe Sane on the left, and like Havertz in behind them trying to feed them. I think that for me works a lot better. But that Germany-Portugal game, I think, is huge. Ronaldo, came clutch at the end of the game against Hungary. I think they huffed and puffed. But, as I said, like with many of the other teams, they had a fairly solid performance. They got the 3 points. That was the most important thing. But I'm very, very much looking forward to that Germany-Portugal game. So next we're going to talk about Belgium, who I actually think are quite similar to England, not in results or anything like that, but in terms of their squad. And I think their squad is very kind of top heavy in terms of a lot of their talent is in the attacking front. So your De Bruyne's, your Lukaku's, your Carrasco's, your Mertens, your Hazard's. Whereas the problem I've seen with Belgium is the defense. I think Denayer, Vertonghen, and Alderweireld look very sus. The goal they conceded against Denmark was very poor, and I actually think this could really hamper them moving forward into the competition, more so than many people think. I think in games further down the line, when Lukaku, De Bruyne maybe aren't able to break down a more stubborn defense, that puts even more pressure on the defense to not concede, because if the attackers can't score, you need to make sure you keep it very tight at the back to make sure that you know, all it takes is one chance for you to win the game. And I definitely didn't see that. I think Alderweireld and Vertonghen have had their time. You know, we saw Vertonghen move on from Tottenham. Even Tottenham thought he had his time. And, you know, Vermaelen was coming on for Belgium against Denmark as well. And so I think that back three is really going to negatively impact Belgium as they move forward. But from an attacking sense, everything they've done so far just looks amazing. Lukaku in that first game against Russia was just amazing, bullying the defenders, and someone I think who is sorely missed in the Premier League. I can't believe we let a striker like that leave the Premier League, because he is so good. The way he makes those runs in behind, he's an aerial threat, he's great at finishing. He can turn defenders on his left foot and on his right foot, and honestly, just all-round fantastic striker. He is in my fantasy team, and obviously his 2 goals against Russia worked very well. But yeah, fantastic player, and he's been amazing. De Bruyne obviously making his first appearance in this tournament against Denmark, came on with a goal and an assist. The assist was fantastic. The composure to just dink the ball around the defender and then square it for Torgan Hazard was fantastic, and you know, that was just prime De Bruyne, we say. We didn't see him in the Champions League final doing things like that, but fantastic for him. And it'll be interesting to see what happens against some of the better teams as they get later on in the competition, when they play against teams that sit back, whether De Bruyne will struggle like he did against Chelsea in the Champions League final, where he really wasn't able to influence the game, or whether maybe having someone like a Lukaku as an actual proper striker, which he didn't have in that Champions League final, will help him. But yeah, I think Belgium look very good. Tielemans looks good in the midfield, but I still think Roberto Martinez will be having sleepless nights about his defenders. Courtois looked okay as well, nothing too special, but I do think that defence is really going to hamper them. And actually, as I said at the beginning of this little piece, that I think they are very similar to England, and some of those defensive frailties maybe won't get exposed in the group stages, but it will still keep the managers very wary of that. And as they go on to face each other, the Frances, the Germanys, the Portugals, the Englands, the Belgiums, some of those defensive frailties I definitely think will be exposed. And so that's it, guys. That is how we wrap up this first episode. We finished match day 1. We're halfway through match day 2 now, and obviously, as I said earlier in the episode, that the third match day 3 games will be all played at the same time, which obviously adds an interesting element to it, particularly with teams who maybe finish first or second, which will decide who they ultimately play in the round of 16. And I'm sure there will be some people jockeying around with positions, trying to finish second, maybe to give themselves an easy draw, or trying to finish first and trying to push for that. So all of that fun and games will start. But tune in, guys, for next week's show as well, where we'll be doing a preview and looking forward to all of the knockout stages, really where the competition gets started and the strong are sorted from the week. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's been a good start to the competition. I just think it's gathering momentum now, and I think we're waiting for one game that's really going to spark the tournament alive, and hopefully we see that very soon. But I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode of the Euro 2020 wrap. I'm excited about the Euros. I'm excited about this series. So make sure you guys show it some love by clicking the like button and subscribing as well if you enjoyed this. But thank you all for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.